This is Paul Maulsby with Genesource Cattle Company and Dave Allan. We're based out of Texas and we're a semen distribution company. As we sit here and talk and think about what is important or what is happening in the club calf sire world as we embark upon the fall breeding season, there's a few things that we kind of wanted to touch on. So kind of what's new and what's hot in the club calf world. You know, Dave, one of the things that I get a lot of my friends asking me, because we're based in Texas and that we have slick sheared cattle, and some of my friends in the north work with haired cattle, and as we kind of sell semen, is that what are kind of some of the differences that you think in terms of haired cattle versus slick sheared cattle in terms of the sire perspective?
Oh, I mean, I think there definitely is some differences. There's a lot of bulls basically from both camps, I think, that cross over. Bulls that'll work in the north and down here. But then I think there's some in particular that fit Texas and the slick shear market, and even our haired cattle probably tend to be built just a little different than the ones up north. As far as, I don't think, down here they're just typically going to be a little bit stouter in terms of shape and bone, and we have one big haired show, that's it. And so after that, I mean, it's all about slick sheared. So I think definitely the sires that are popular, like I said, there is some crossover, but quite a few of the bulls used are a bit different than what's popular in the north.
Would you say those cattle typically just have, like you talked about, muscle, but I think like just top shape and muscle expression? And then one of the things is that I think when you look at cattle from the side and you read them as slick ones, that they have to read with more shape and they have to read with more turn to their top, and especially if you study them right behind their blade. I mean, it's almost like studying a hog.
Oh, I
a little bit.
Totally agree that, you have to have some true shape. Up north, it seems like it's more of a width situation.
Right.
And that width can be skeleton, it can be muscle, it can be fat, it can be hair. Down here, they have to have some true shape and expression. And then, like you said, the best way to is compare it to a hog. I mean, they have to have some turn in their top, some turn in their quarter. And that what's hard with the slick shear deal is you have to get them stout and have a lot of shape. But to win, they have to be sound, they have to be good bodied, and they have to be good looking. So overall, it just takes a really good one.
And I don't think either one of them is right or wrong. It's just that in order to be successful at it, you kind of have to have the differences. And one of the things I think I noticed was when we first started with slick ones, as we tend to do, we single trait select for something. So you think muscle, muscle, muscle. And then we got to the point where you slick them off and joints and structure is even more evident. And so then we had to kind of back it off at how much muscle is too much muscle kind of deal.
Yeah, I totally agree that, and I've had, over the years, I've had friends from the north that say, hey, I've got a great steer that could win down there. He's got a ton of shape. He's really clean front. And that's kind of a misnomer.
Right.
Because structure, and you just hit the nail right on the head, you slick them off and your joints have to be good, your angles have to be good.
Right.
I mean, they are what they are, and so it takes a really sound one, besides having one with shape and a good look, and they gotta have some body too, because it's the same thing. I mean, you can't build their belly, clip their belly into them.
Right, exactly.
It's what you have is what you have.
I agree. And one of the things I think I kind of noticed too, especially as you studied slick ones, but I think it's kind of transcending into all of the cattle, was color. I mean, obviously when I showed, or when, which was a long ass time ago, but you would think about everything was black, and you would think that every sire you bred to was black. You really would only kind of pick colored cattle just if you were trying to target breed steers. And I think that really changed, and I really noticed that when I moved from Oklahoma to Texas and started seeing more slick ones, that it's not that the black cattle or the red cattle or Charolais cross cattle are that much better. I think they just look better in presentation in the ring, and those cattle typically maybe had just a little more of those attributes that we were talking about in shape and turn. But I do think colored ones have a little more pop and a little more presence.
I agree that the yellows and the silvers, I mean, but I agree with the fact that I think they do look better under the light, slicked off.
Right.
But also on the flip side, I'm a big believer, and we used to raise a lot of show steers. I don't raise that many anymore, but we used to raise a bunch of them. And part of it is just the Charolais cattle made them better.
Right.
You know, just having to find a breed of cattle that were stout and still sound and would feed. And so when we mixed them with the mains and the club calf genetics, I mean, I think we came up with some pretty neat stuff. But I mean, they were real, and it wasn't a hair situation. And so I think part of, and if you look at like a lot of the steers that win the blacks now, or the reds, or whatever breed, whatever color, a lot of those are even Charolais influenced.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what, you know, they're a yellow cow bred to a yellow bull, and they lucked out and got a red one. You know,
Yeah,
and so I think that, you know, like the slick shear cattle in general, the quarter blood, 3/8, whatever you want to call it, half blood Charolais, in a lot of instances made them better.
So when we talk about Genesource, obviously we're a semen distribution company, and so we target all over the United States, in the club calf world, breeding cattle world, multiple breeds, and we hit those markets. But you know, what has it kind of done in terms of, you think, in terms of the bulls that we promote or sell? I mean, is it very divided between the two regions, slick haired, and then kind of how does that dynamic of the bull that does both kind of fit in there? And then maybe what are some of those bulls?
I think there's a lot of crossover, because maybe our cows are different,
Right.
and especially right now, you know, there's been so much Charolais influence down here the last 15 to 20 years, and so some of the bulls do work both. It's just that they're breeding them to black mane cross cows, and we're breeding them to silver Charolais cross
Sure.
cows down here. So there is crossover, and bull wise, you know, like, you know, the most popular bulls in the north, the Here I Am, Fu Manchu, Monopoly, MAB still to a degree. You know, I would say that's your, you know, you look at
Right.
the state fair champions, and that's what a lot of them are. And those bulls all get used down here, maybe
Right.
not on as high, you know, maybe not every, you know, every club calf breeder in the north using one or all of those four bulls,
Right.
or has.
The
And,
predictable ones that work.
yeah, and they're proven, and like all bulls and all breeds, they don't work every time, but they work more
Right.
often than others. And you've seen all those used down here, and you still do, but you know, we have some of the other bulls that don't get used as heavily up north, you know, like a BDR.
Right.
That bull's done
Business
well
done
down
right.
here.
Yeah.
But now a bull that probably maybe as big a crossover bull as there is right now is the Ngave Trust.
Right. And he's one of those, I think, that has the dynamics in terms of his structure and phenotype and muscle, but he still has good quality hair, which Business Done Right doesn't have a good hair coat.
That's probably that's the biggest
Right.
difference in those two bulls, and why one's more popular in
Right.
the north than the other.
I think one of the things too that maybe even when talking about the differences that haired cattle, and because we single trait selected for muscle a little bit down here, that we lost sight that the mates to these potentially still had to have some maternal strength to them. And we maybe in this part of the world, being in Texas or the South where there's slick sheared steers, we didn't concentrate enough maybe on keeping them having some maternal.
Oh, I totally
in terms of getting in structure and rib shape and doability. And I think that's one thing that you've seen the evolution of slick shearing, that they become a little more practical in their basic build and kind.
Yeah.
And that's probably where I think the northern cattle have done a better job in terms of maintaining some of those things.
Yeah. No, I would agree that the cow herd down here has gotten plenty terminal.
Sure.
And it has made certain bulls work, you know, like the Business Done Right situation, right or wrong, he probably works best on a terminal market heifer looking
Sure.
cow, you know.
Exactly.
And maybe that's another reason he's more popular down here.
That very well could be. Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the things also that I get a lot of our bull customers calling about and kind of buzzwords in this industry, you know, we talked about slick, we talked about hair, but now we're talking about clean bulls, or we're talking about TH or pH free bulls. And I think the thing for people to recognize that if something's a carrier doesn't mean that they don't have any usefulness. It's just that you've got to be aware in your matings. And so have you seen that kind of change?
I think, and people have become a lot more aware of that the
Right.
last 10 years, and figuring out which lines are clean, whether it's TH or PHA. And now we even have DS, which we don't know near as much about.
Right.
We don't have near as much information. But, you know, and that's why, you know, people that are, and almost everyone nowadays is aware and pays attention. Even more people are testing their cows. You know, and that makes like a bull like Front and Center has become quite popular down here the last 2 years because he is clean, both cases, works on a variety of cows, and also throws a variety of colors.
Sure.
And that's something that not every bull will do. And now that we've changed up our classifying a little bit,
Right.
we want some blacks, we want some reds, trying to get a little bit away from the Charolais, maybe in terms of some of these breeds. And so that's a bull that, for a clean bull, that
Right.
just become quite popular.
Do you think that clean bulls, I know everybody gets kind of these kind of misconceptions, I think is what you say, but the clean bulls typically don't have as much muscle to them or things like that. But I don't know if that's typically the case. It's like if the bull's the bull kind of deal.
Yeah, no, and I mean, that's kind of become everybody thinks, well, they have to be dirty to be good. And I think it's more of a mating situation. Is you got to look at the bull, you got to look at the cow. I think some of those clean bulls got a bad name because they took a taller, flatter made cow and bred her to a taller, flatter made clean bull, and they're like, well, these clean bulls don't work. Well, depends what you're putting them on, and there are some clean bulls now that are pretty stout. I mean, I've seen some clean bulls in the last year or two that you would never believe they were.
Right.
And some breeders have specifically been trying to keep those cattle around too. You know, like, you know, Brandon Horns, he's tried to keep some clean bulls that he could have cut and sold for a lot of money.
Right.
And other people have too. And I think that's what's kind of changing that thought that they have to be dirty to be stout enough or good enough.
I think another thing is kind of, you know, we want to produce cattle that can win steer shows, or if you're going a little more in the breeding direction, you know, kind of cattle that can win heifer shows, but we still have to have sires that have some calving ease in them too. And so it's like we've seen trying to kind of target in our company is bulls that can still do all these things and still have some calving ease to them. And do you feel like we're getting more and more people that are not just finding a solution of breeding to an Angus bull, and they're still using some of these club kit bulls, or kind of what's your thought?
There is some bulls that work, and now, you know, one thing with any composite animal, I guess is what you could say we're raising,
right,
is you're never going to get the predictability of using, say, a straight calving ease Angus bull or red Angus bulls. But there's some bulls, you know, like the old bull Hef,
right,
high percentage Charolais. He has been one of the more consistent calving ease bulls, you know, over the years. There's Rapid Rewards was a son. He did a good job. He was probably a little more hit and miss. You get a little more whatever was in the cow.
Right.
You know, if she was a heat wave, you know, she was a heat wave daughter and she had 110 pound birth weight, he's probably not going to make her throw a 70 pound.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you're still going to get a little push from the.
You know, there's another Hef son called Steph that's kind of arriving, that's doing a nice job calving ease wise. You know, size matters. He would go back to some of that kind of breeding. So there's some options that will sure work. You know, if you're sure enough want to calve them at 2 years old and you're worried to death, you know, you're probably going to have to look more at an Angus or a red Angus.
Right.
You know, Griswold's got a red Angus bull called Detour that a lot of folks have gotten along with.
I've had a lot of customers use him, and they really liked him.
We even used him. We used to have just a very few purebred red Angus, but we had some excellent. We had a heifer Warner division in Houston, and so, you know, there's some options if you want to get away from the club cap. But if you want to breed club cap, I mean, there's some options too.
And I think that's one of the things that I pride ourselves here at Genesource is that we've bred them, we've calved them, and kind of had the heartaches and the problems and things just like our customers do. And so, like, anytime anybody has a question, we sure do encourage everybody to kind of call in to us and kind of ask, and we'll sure give our honest opinion or from our experience in terms of what we do. So we work hard, I feel like, on trying to figure out what works best in each scenario. And so we'll encourage everybody to call for that.
No, and I think that's what maybe makes us a little different at Genesource here is, whether it's Paul, myself, or Drew Schmidt that works for us. Drew takes a lot of orders too, and packs probably most of the orders. And, you know, every one of us has had our arm in a cow, whether it was breeding or calving.
You bet.
And a lot of different breeds, whether it was club calf or purebred breeds or even commercial cattle. And I think that gives you a different perspective when you're selling, whether you're selling animals or selling semen. I mean, you want it to work for your customers because we've all been through the good and the bad.
No, I agree. And I think it gives you a genuine perspective. And I think when you know, our customer success is our success. And so I think kind of doing that helps. You know, one of the things as I've come on board is everybody kind of thinks about those tried and true sires, and you kind of talk to them. In fact, we were having this conversation earlier today that at the Illinois State Fair, I believe it was, like, even though Heat Wave still raised the champion steer.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those bulls, maybe not way back, but some of them that still have some current utility to them that are going to still be relevant. But I think one of the things that people want to do is the new one. You know, we're going to go to Denver and see this calf, or we're going to see a new picture on a phone, we're going to see one on social media, and they don't know much about him. But what makes, in your mind, some of those up and coming ones work, not work, or what are your suggestions on those?
You know, like, and I've never been the big proponent of find 20 new bulls and try to get everyone to use them. I mean,
Right.
We'd all like to see what they'll do. But I don't want to be the guinea pig, and I wouldn't want anybody else to be. Now, I think there is some of them that are good enough that they warrant trying a little bit. And, you know, like this year in Denver, that When in Doubt bull
I like
that Wade
that calf.
Rogers had. I mean,
I
I saw him out loose in the pen, and then 3 months later, and this even made me feel better, one of my good friends in Nebraska saw him at the bull stud.
Right.
And it was funny because he was talking about the bull and describing him, how great he looked at the bull stud in May with his
Right.
hair half shedded off. And he was saying the exact same things that I saw in Denver in January. And so
It was a genuine kind of.
yeah, that made me feel good about, you know, you never know how they'll breed, but phenotypically, structurally, I mean, that's a good bull. And I think if a person wants to reach out there on some newer things, that's one that would sure intrigue me.
I've had a few people have talked about a bull front and center that's done a nice job. There's been some higher selling calves that have kind of come along with him and kind of has that soft rib to them, and they look good. So it's, like you said, I think that obviously some of those bulls are going to work and that they're worth trying. But I don't know that you put all your eggs in one basket with a new one, and that there's something to be said for that. And there's also something to be said, though, I think, for recognizing when a bull has run its course.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the other end of that spectrum. I think you can keep using one that just forecasting what's going to happen in marketability, because what we're breeding today may be what we're marketing next year or the year after if we're talking breeding cattle. And so you kind of have to think a little forward thinking as you get those bulls.
Yes,
you get one that's
agree.
kind of, so getting on the phone, calling us, or talking to your friends, or kind of doing a little research, and not just breeding off a picture, I think is some advice that I always give people I work with.
Yeah,
So,
no, and I agree. And we get to see some cattle. I wish we got to see more, but we do get to talk to a lot of different producers. And when you start getting the same feedback over and over,
Right.
whether it's good or bad, then it typically tends to be true.
So if you were going to name one or two up and coming slick shearing sires that you would consider, what would maybe those be?
Keeping the faith.
Yeah,
New bull of Brandon Horns. That one intrigues me. Let's see. Another one of Brandon's Slingshots. That was one of the neat bulls that I've seen in the last 6 months. Those are a couple that sure intrigue me.
I know he's maybe not new. What about Holy Smoker?
Yeah, that bull's about a year
I know
ago.
he's got some calves.
About a year ago, Wade Rogers and I were talking, and he said he thought that was his most underrated bull. And as far as a bull that'll throw good structure and balance, and on the right cows that they're stout enough. And I've seen more of those since, and I would agree.
And he's free. He's a clean bull, double clean bull.
And he's gray, but he throws some black ones.
Yeah.
And
so that Monopoly Troubadour kind of cross on him works.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
The Monopoly tree, you got the coolness and the shape of Troubadour and the softness of Monopoly, so it makes sense that he would work.
I think, those definitely are, some bulls, and then there's some old standards that have been there too. But I think that those are ones that you definitely consider. There's another bull I think of Brandon's. We've talked a lot about him. Obviously, we think a lot of those cattle and work with him, but there's a lot of other ones too. But that's right. I think
that's
it's one
a
that
new
both you and I
upcoming
kind of
bull
like.
that, yeah, I've seen that bull 2 or 3 times in person and really liked him. Seen just a couple of calves, but I think that bull's gonna work.
Okay.
You know, another bull that's popular right now that's fairly new, and I don't know if I've pinpointed how to mate him, but the Red Rocky Bull.
Right.
There was sure some high sellers last spring, and they were good calves.
You know, that's kind of interesting. You know, he's a clone of a champion steer. I think 2015 Denver, a red steer that was super popular, and that bull, I think we get a lot of play on that calf.
Yeah, kind of the same situation as Solid Gold, who basically revolutionized the slick shear world down here.
That's
right. He was probably the first true slick shearing bull, you know, that did it time and time again.
And ironically, I think he was one that actually kind of made some females that worked too.
Yeah, you know, a lot of the good steers you'll see nowadays, you know, you ask what she got, it'll be a Solid Gold cow. And I'm not saying they're the ultimate maternal female, but they do produce. I mean, they've bred on.
What do you, and you touched on this just a little bit, the In God We Trust, and I think that that's probably one of the hottest bulls in terms of our lineup. And as you and I've judged shows, there's kind of a lot of those calves are that way, and they sell well. What is it about him that gives him kind of the versatility and utility? And I think he actually works both sides of the equation.
I agree. And I think probably one of the biggest things that I've seen with my own eyes and heard from multiple producers is consistency.
Right.
You know, there's some of these bulls and they produce great ones that win shows, but it's a 1 out of 10 situation as far as getting good calves. And that bull probably I was just yesterday talking to a good friend in Oklahoma. He's raised some great cattle. He said if I had 100 cows and I had to pick one bull to breed them all to, he said it'd have to be him.
Right.
And he said not that they're all going to be
perfect,
$10,000 plus steers and be perfect, but he said I would sell more calves, you know, on a percentage basis than any other bull I know of, and I would agree.
Well, and that's the thing. I think you got to think about it as, say, if you're breeding 10 cows, or you're breeding 100 cows, or breeding 1,000 cows, is that the calves that you create need to all have some utility and usefulness.
Yeah.
So if you're going to go to the sale barn, even with the bottom 10%, which, let's be real with each other, that kind of happens. You still need to have,
it's going to be there.
They still need to be useful type of cattle.
Yeah.
So,
and we've all held of some of those in that you wish you had a Holstein because they bring more. We sure want to do all we can to avoid those kind.
And I think that's what happens with those bulls that are so inconsistent. You can have one that's great and you sell a $20,000 steer, and you can have one that's really not, you know, the bottom end of the pile. And so I think that is one thing that In God We Trust seems to be
I would say more consistent than a lot.
I think so too. And again, you go back, I mean, he's a business done right son, and he's out of a heat wave cow and out of his 419 donor at Brandon's.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing to kind of touch on when you're talking about these sires in the club calf world. You know, I think we target on cow families really strongly and do a really good job about that in the breeding cow world. But I think that there's something to be said from the maternal side of these bulls that are sired too. And doing a little research on those, you see cows that...
Yeah, there's cows that can do it over and over.
Right.
You know, like Gretzka's 805 cow. You know, there's multiple bulls out there out of her and multiple steers that have won. You know, Brandon Horn's 419 and then the daughter 620. There's been multiple bulls, multiple steers. You know, and so some of these, you know, I think we could probably in the club calf world do a little better job. And I think a few people are right now, but of stacking some of these good cows.
I agree.
You know, and not just, oh, it's a nice bull, let's use him.
Yeah, I agree with you totally on that. You know, I think as we kind of have touched, and I think we're going to have more of these series that we're going to have kind of topics, whether it's breeding cattle, specific breeds, or kind of just our thought processes. But we wanted to start this podcast at a time to share you know, just our thoughts, like it'd be like when we're on the phone talking to our customers, or when we're out in the pasture looking at calves that are sired by Genesource sires, or up and coming sires we maybe would like to list. So I think it would be important for those to look forward to some of your topics, and if some people have something they want us to talk about, I'm open to them sending me a message on Facebook.
Yeah, email or call or text or
go to our website, go to our Facebook page, Instagram, the mediums that we're using to spread the word about Genesource.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be great. Say, like I say, we have a few topics we're going to touch on, but if there's something you'd like to hear about, and I guess our opinion, I don't know, it's just an opinion.
Yeah.
But we'd sure be glad to discuss it.
So that's podcast 1 for Genesource. Wrapped it up. Thanks for spending some time with us. That was actually easier than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, like once you